All right, so we are going to draw this eye here. And we're going to draw it two sides. So you can keep your page flipped horizontally or vertically like this. And then we'll probably do the eye here and then maybe like lips or something below. But just keep in mind, like, you basically are going to want a box this size available, because we're going to do the eye, we're going to do a little bit of the skin below, we're going to do the eyebrow. So that's about how much space we need. And we're going to draw it two sides. Okay, so first we're going to start by drawing the eyeball shape. So that's that almond shape. So measure with your fingers how tall is it, and we're not including any skin. And again, make sure you leave space above for the eyebrow. So you could even measure to make sure you left enough space. So I measured the height of the eyeball, and then I made two little lines to say, okay, that's the height. Then I'm going to measure the width without the tear duct. We'll add that later. And that's about the width. Once you have that, go ahead and draw in the shape. Try to draw lightly, because more than likely you're going to have to erase at some point, and you want to be able to erase out without seeing the lines that you just tried to erase. So after you draw your shape, keep looking back and forth. Remember, draw what you see, not what you think you see. So keep looking. Look at the curve of the bottom of the eye. That curve is way less than the curve at the top. So is your drawing reflecting that? Look at the length of the top curve. I'm kind of feeling like I might need to widen it out just a little. So just keep scanning your drawing, scanning the photo, looking at what do I need to adjust. Okay, and then let's add the tear duct. Most tear ducts kind of angle down just a little. Okay, and then we'll do the iris, which is the colored part of the eye. Now, the iris is a perfect circle. If you pulled both your eyelids back, you would see a circle. But the top of the circle is cut off quite a bit, and then the bottom of her iris of that circle is cut off maybe just a little teeny bit. So, again, just draw it super light, because, whenever I draw an iris, I usually have to adjust what I drew. So it's okay. Don't expect yourself to draw exactly correct the first way. Just adjust from what you've got. So again, you want to draw an actual circle. I think a lot of people mess up here and draw an oval. So try to make it a circle as best as you can, but that circle is cut off quite a bit at the top and cut off just a little bit at the bottom. And then you could even measure the width of that circle to see, like, okay, did I get about the right size of the circle? Because you want to try to get it to be the same, like you want the same distance on the left side of that white space of the eye, and you want the same distance on the right side of that white space of the eye. Okay, and then we're going to put in the pupil. So that's the black part. Now, do not add any value. Like, once you add the pupil, don't fill it in. because that's like what every person wants to do initially. But if you find that you drew it in the wrong spot, then it's hard to erase that out. Now, just remember the pupil is centered in the iris. Like if you pull your eyelids back, you would find that it's centered, but it does appear a little higher up just because more of the iris is cut off at the top. So yeah, try to make that reflected in your drawing. But the pupil is also a circle. And then now we're going to draw the shape of the reflection, which is inside the pupil. Sometimes it'll be on the pupil and on the iris, sometimes one or the other. So with this eye, it looks like it's only on the top part of that pupil. So let's draw that rectangular shape for the reflection. And I just like to draw that shape so that when I start adding value, I know I'm going to avoid getting any value right there. Especially because when you start adding the black for the pupil, like once you add black with charcoal, you can never get it back to pure white. So you just want to make sure you don't get charcoal there. There is a little bit of a light spot on the bottom of her iris, but I don't think that's a reflection. I think that's just the way the color of her eye is. So okay, and then next let's do the eyelid crease. So that's this line above the eye. So again, you could even measure how far away is it from her eye. I'm going to start on the inner corner. I mean, you could start on the inner corner or the outer corner, but I would start on an outer edge. And then just try to follow that curve. It typically does get a little farther away from the eye towards the outer edge. So it's a little closer on the inner corner of the eye, and then it gets a little farther away on the outer corner. Okay, the last thing we need to add is the waterline, which is the edge of the skin that you can see right here along the bottom. You do have a waterline on your top eyelid, but we can't see it because of the angle that the eyelid comes down. So you only draw it on the bottom. And it's like a really close line that we're just going to draw kind of following the bottom edge of the eye. Try to make it really light because in the long run you don't want to see it. But that's where your eyelashes grow out of. So you'll want to remember that when you start to draw the bottom eyelashes, they grow out of this water line, not out of the eyeball itself. Okay, so then from here, it's just starting to add value because the eyelashes you do last after you build up all the value around. And then we'll do the hair towards the end as well. I guess we could kind of draw in the shape of the eyebrow. So let's do that. I would measure, again, with your fingers, how far is the eyebrow from the eye. And then, so let's do that. Let's draw the bottom edge of the eyebrow first. So how far is it from the eye? Now you're going to want to draw a very light outline because the eyebrow will have like individual hairs visible. So in the end, you don't want like a harsh outline. We want to see like individual hairs in the end. Try to get the arch of her eyebrow. It happens, I would say, just a little after her iris. And then the outer corner of the eyebrow comes out a little bit farther than where her eye ends. So it's going to come farther out to the right. Then you can measure the height of the eyebrow. Now it is pretty thin towards the inner left-hand side, but again, we'll just add those hair details later. So just kind of like draw a real light outline that we will fill in later. Really try to look at the curve, because everybody's eyebrows are going to be shaped differently. So try to make this specific to this person's eyebrow. And try to keep it light, because again, when we go to draw the little hairs, we don't want to see a heavy outline in the end. Okay, so now we're going to start doing some shading. So I usually kind of start towards the center of the eye and then kind of work your way out. So we'll start by adding some value. Now we're going to wait on the pupil, because the pupil is with charcoal, and your pencil can't get black. Only charcoal can get black. So we're going to wait on the pupil, but let's start on the iris, the colored part of the eye. And the outer edge of her iris is definitely darker, so let's make the outer edge of this iris darker. And then you can kind of see like that radial design where it's like lines kind of going in, going around the iris. So you can kind of just start by doing those. So after you've added a good first layer, we can kind of start blending some of that out. Now, when you do value, just remember it's going to be done in layers. So like this is just our first layer of value. We are not going to be done after this. This is not going to be enough value, not enough detail. We got to do more than just this. So just kind of blend that out. Then go back, look at the photo, and then look at your drawing and look at what do I need to add to match the values to the photo. So I'm going to continue to build up some of this value around the outer edge of the iris, and then maybe also around the outsides of the pupil. The inner parts of her iris is pretty light, so I might even have to go back in with an eraser and lighten some of it a little bit. The upper part of the iris is pretty dark. A lot of the time, there's a shadow cast from your eyelid and eyelashes, so the upper part of your iris is going to appear darker. So after you add another layer of value, blend it out. Okay, and then look at especially on her eye down here, towards the bottom right below her pupil, it's really light. So you might need to go back in and lighten some of that with your eraser. See if you can do some like smaller, lighter shapes within. We can also darken part of this iris with charcoal once we start with charcoal. But you should have an overall like fairly dark area around the outside. Okay, so after you've added value to the iris, let's go to the white parts of the eye, the outer edges. So the especially on the right side, there's a shadow on the top part under her eyelashes. So Try to add it pretty lightly though. It's not a very dark shadow. And then on the left side, I would say most of the shadow is more towards the inner corner, towards her tear duct. And then you can also add some value for the tear duct itself. There is a pretty big reflection in there, so see if you can leave some of that area white for the reflections. And then blend that out with your Q-tip. I would use the clean end of your Q-tip. And then, in some of the lighter areas, like, I would say there is a lighter line along the bottom edge of the white of her eye. You can use some of that value that you have on your Q-tip and just get some of that light value down there. That way you don't have to try to press super light with your pencil to get those light values, because that can be kind of hard. All right, so we're gonna add the charcoal to the pupil. Remember to not add any charcoal where you put the reflection. Okay, and then within the reflection, do you all see how you can see like the reflection of two eyelashes and like a line within the reflection of her reflection? Do you guys see that? The two eyelashes in that line. So you do need to have like a pretty fine point on your charcoal, but see if you can add those details in the top part of that reflection. Those two, like there's like maybe 3 little lines in there. Okay, and then like I'm finding my pencil is not quite getting dark enough for like the outer edge of her iris. So now I'm gonna go in with some charcoal just to build up some of that darker value. Now, I'm not trying to get it to be black or anything, so I'm not pressing super hard. And I'm gonna blend this out with my Q-tip, but I'm just gonna push these values a little darker by adding charcoal. Yeah, please do. Thank you. Okay, and then again, we'll wait on the eyelashes, so don't do those yet, because those are black, and so we would want to use charcoal for those once we do that. But let's start doing her skin value around the eyeball. So really it's a light gray everywhere except for there's like a highlight down here at the bottom, kind of along that bottom waterline. Everywhere else has at least somewhat of a gray. So I always start by adding it on the inner corner because that's typically where it's a little bit darker. I'm not going to use charcoal yet on that eyelid crease, but I am going to darken that a little bit more so I don't lose it when I start to add the gray of her skin tone. But now I'm going to start building some of the gray towards the inner corner, going all the way up to the eyebrow. And then you'll see it kind of curves in right here because that's starting to form where her nose is. So let's bring that darker value over. And then just keep bringing some of that up. Try to keep your movements pretty smooth and light so that you'll be able to blend all this out. And we'll use a tissue here in a second to blend with. The bad thing about Q-tips with larger areas is it will make it look streaky. So I would only use Q-tips on small areas where you're doing small details like an iris or the lips or like small details in the nose. So I'm going to add value on the outer edge of the eye on the right side. And then I think that's a pretty good first layer. So now I'm going to use a tissue to blend it out. Okay, so when you go to blend, I would still kind of like bunch up your tissue into a small shape. Because like I see a lot of kids, they'll just start going like round and round and round and round. And then you like lose all of your edges. You don't want to over blend. So like you're just going to try to stay within the skin. Like don't even try to touch the eyeball. Because we're not doing anything with the eyeball right now. So try to start blending. And you can, though, also try to carry the value from these inner and outer corners and try to bring them into the middle. So that you're starting to get gray everywhere. All right, and then, so that was just the first layer. Now look back at the drawing or the image and then you're drawing and look at, okay, where do I need to darken it? So I'm going to darken it on the left side. You might, and wait on the eyelid crease. Again, we're going to add charcoal here eventually. The inside of the top of the curve of her eye, it's lighter right here, and that's what's going to make it look like it's three-dimensional, like it's popping out. So I'm going to go back in with my eraser and just lighten this top part of the curve of her eyelid just a little bit, and then I'm going to blend that out once I start blending. But that's going to help kind of emphasize that curve. Okay, so you should have added a second layer of value. Then let's blend that out. Again, try not to over blend. Kind of blend out what you erased to get rid of any harsh edges. And then now let's start working below the eye, the skin below. When you do that, you want to kind of try to avoid the waterline. So we are going to continue bringing that gray down and around. It is a little darker towards the bottom right, so try to keep that in your drawing. Okay, so after you've added that layer of value, blend it with the tissue. And then we will add the detail of wrinkles later, so because you can kind of see some wrinkles under the bottom of her eye. So let's add one more layer of value below the eye. She's got a pretty heavy shadow right here towards the bottom right. So I'm going to darken mine. You probably need to darken yours, so let's do that. That's mostly probably a shadow cast from her eyelashes and her eyelid. Okay, and then let's go in and lighten some of these highlights that she has. And kind of blend around those. Okay, now we're going to practice eyelashes. So when you do an eyelash, let's practice off to the side. So push your sketchbook up. We're going to do it like below or beside, just not on the eye. Okay, so when you do eyelashes, or a piece of hair, a follicle of hair, where is it the thickest? At the root or at the tip?
At the tip. At the
It's
root.
it's the thickest at the root. So we want to try to show that with these eyelashes. We want it to look thicker at the base and then thinner at the tip. The other thing with eyelashes, when you draw a eyelash, you're gonna always start, actually just draw a curve to pretend like that's the top of the eye. Let's just make an almond shape to say, okay, that's an eye. So we're gonna practice adding eyelashes to this eye. So you always start your pencil at the root of the hair, and you want to kind of press harder, and then as you come up, you want to go in the direction of the curve of the eyelash. So for this eye, her eyelash is on the top curve from the left to the right, so you want to try to do that on yours. They kind of curve down and then they go up. Now, so you press hard, you release your pressure as you come up, and that's going to make that line become thinner and lighter. Then you'll notice her eyelashes are in clumps. They're a little bit more separate towards the outer corner, but towards the inner part, there's fewer of them and they're in clumps. So then practice making eyelashes where they come together at the top. So, and kind of try to practice looking at this actual eye and looking at, okay, how would I make them if I'm making this eye? They can get a little bit more tricky when you start to move towards the inner part of the eye because the curve is at a different angle and they almost look like they're more just straight up. And then when you get to the inner corner of the eye, the left side of the eye, they're going to curve to the left. And they're shorter and they're thinner. And that's how everybody's eyelashes are. So then practice on the bottom. Remember, let's add a little water line so we can practice drawing the eyelashes not on the eyeball itself. Just to help you remember. But on that water line, you're going to, so from that second line, you're going to make your eyelashes come out of that line. Now, her bottom eyelashes are pretty long. If you were drawing a male, maybe they probably wouldn't be as long or noticeable, and even other females. Not everybody's eyelashes are quite this long. So, but go ahead and draw some of her bottom eyelashes. They do kind of have a funkier direction of curve. Some of them go different directions. So try to get those clumps of those eyelashes. Press hard at the root and release your pressure as you're coming towards the tip. And then practice some on the inner corner as well. Again, just remember there's not as many of them and they're usually a little bit longer. Shorter. They're not as long, they're shorter. So, and then once you've got some practice, go ahead and start adding them to your actual eye. I would suggest doing it in pencil first and then going over that with charcoal. Just because if you mess up, you'll be able to erase it. If you mess up with charcoal, that's going to be a lot harder to erase. And for time's sake, we're only going to do some of the eyelashes because we also need to do the eyebrows still. So really try to follow the clumps. Like towards the outer edge, she does have some pretty long eyelashes. They do go past her eyelid crease. So she kind of has like a major clump on the very corner. And then she's got another clump following that. So kind of try to draw them in those clumps. So after you draw maybe like 3 clumps worth, start adding the charcoal on top. If you don't have your charcoal sharpened to a fine point, you're going to find it's harder to draw the small line detail. And then the very top edge, there's just a lot of darkness along that edge as well. So you might also just go in with your charcoal and start to kind of thicken up the base of where her eyelashes are to start building up that dark value that she's got. Kind of make it look a little bit more full. And then practice also adding some on the bottom. They are a little bit lighter. So if you find, like I feel like I made mine a little too dark, so I'm going to try to lighten them with my eraser. You always want to save those Q-tips that you use because sometimes having a dirty Q-tip is good to add, like to help add value in like little areas where you don't want to use your pencil. You can just use that Q-tip instead. And so like I might add a little bit of value on that water line with a dirty Q-tip because I think if I try to with my pencil, it might be a little dark. So after I blend out some of that pencil I just put down, I can use that value I have on my Q-tip now and start to get some grays on there. So just keep scanning your drawing, scanning the image, looking at where do I need to darken it. Oh, I don't think we ever used charcoal on the eyelid crease. That's that line above the eye. We definitely need to add charcoal there. So do that. Try to follow your line that you had drawn. I will say it looks a little thicker and darker, more towards like the top part, like where it lines up with her iris. So you might try to kind of make it a little darker there. And then another place is below her eye. She's got some little wrinkles down there. So I would suggest just using your normal pencil to add the wrinkles down below because they're not super dark. So you might just kind of add some wrinkles and then blend around it. And just like I said, keep scanning, looking for areas where do you need to darken it to match the image. Like you might go in with some charcoal near her tear duct to kind of darken parts of your drawing. You don't want to overdo it, but just push some of those areas a little darker. So and finish adding those eyelashes. Now this girl's eyebrows are pretty dark. So basically I would use charcoal and you're just gonna move your pencil in the direction of the hair. So if you're starting on the left side, there's hairs that kind of angle more up. And I would do a gray before, I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier. I would do a gray, oh goodness, that's dark. All in that whole area before you start because really there's like just a bunch of hairs with space in between. So you want to still see like her skin tone in between the hairs, at least like at the very beginning part of her eyebrow on the left side. So kind of get like a light gray up there first before you start doing her hairs because you don't want it white in between. And so then it's like the same technique as with eyelashes. You want to just kind of like move your pencil, pressing harder at the root, and then as you come up, you kind of release some of your pressure. Now, as you start to do some of the hairs where the eyebrow is thicker, it's not as big of a deal if you don't do the lines like that because you're going to have such a buildup of lines that you're not going to really be able to tell anyways. But you do want to move your pencil in that same direction. And then there are hairs visible at the top and bottom. Like there's not a solid edge surrounding that eyebrow. It's just lines. So try to make some individual visible hairs at the top and at the bottom. And again, it works best if you have a nicely sharpened charcoal, because you really want to get a pretty fine point to mimic the fine lines of the hair. So like I'm going to sharpen mine because mine got a little dull. And you should have the general shape already drawn, but the goal is to not see that outline that you drew, because nope, she doesn't have a heavy outline on her eyebrows. So in the long run, we shouldn't see any outline. But like when you come over to the part like where her arch is, her hairs are starting to grow in a downward motion. So you want to move your pencil in that downward motion. So just make sure you're looking at that photo. Draw what you see, not what you think you see, because it does shift as it goes along. So you kind of want to make sure you're still going back and checking. And then you might kind of look at where you might need to thicken it. Like it is fuller in some areas. She's got some pretty long stray hairs towards the inner edge.